After the divorce, I waited about a year before I called Winslow Hubble. Things had settled down, and the memories had faded, at least for him. But to me, they were still fresh, still tender. They were still strong enough to propel me forward as I planned and plotted the second half of my revenge. The first part was the divorce itself. It went fairly quickly. Neither Ashley nor I had enough money to interest lawyers, and when the facts of the breakup came out, her parents weren't interested in supporting Ash's plans to tie me up in court. As for the division of property, we didn't have a lot of stuff. We were renting and earning about the same, so it went pretty smoothly despite Ash's best efforts. She didn't want to break up, but I did, and it took her a while to realize that she was no longer steering the ship of our relationship. I tried to convince her gently, but when that didn't work, I threatened to send out videos of her infidelity to everyone in her address book. She folded like an origami artist on speed. And so, less than a year after Ashley arranged her extramarital affairs in our marital bed, we had separate apartments, separate bank accounts, and completely separate lives. We'd always had different friends. For a while we tried to bring them together, but her work buddies belonged to the Brooks Brothers Financial District crowd, while mine gravitated more toward the I was a starving writer and now I'm a corporate salesman at Doc Martin's tribe. As we eventually learned, bloodthirsty jackals and mischievous otters don't get along well together. I considered punishing Ashley for her infidelity, but ultimately decided that divorce was punishment enough. For the sake of a few nights of disgusting entertainment, she had deprived herself of a beautiful marriage, a nice apartment she couldn't afford on her own, and a promotion at work. She worked at Pierce, Bateman, Potter, Gordon, and McDuck, an investment firm that prided itself on having stable, married employees. Unfortunately, Ash no longer fit that definition. She could still climb the career ladder, but it would take longer and be more difficult. Sometimes I wondered which loss hit her harder: our sweet spot on the Upper West Side, our marriage, or her expressway to the corner office. In truth, though, I think I already knew. In the divorce, Ash got Winslow. I think she would have preferred him to leave with me, but she cracked that egg, and I had no problem leaving her to deal with the consequences. Winslow Hubble, you see, was my wife's lover. No, he wasn't. Lover is not the right word. Whatever was going on between Winslow and Ashley had nothing to do with love or even affection. He wasn't her boyfriend either. I hadn't kept tabs on my ex-wife since we'd split. In fact, I'd done my best to completely remove myself from her life. But I was willing to bet my last penny that she hadn't given him the time of day since I'd sent her the video of the two of them. Next chapter. Winslow's phone rang twice before he answered it. The double call was a high school trick he carried over to college and to his job at Pierce, Bateman. Never look impatient, never look desperate, never pick up the phone on the first ring. If you knew this trick, he just looked pathetic. The same could be said for Winslow. His voice aristocratic, arrogant. Winslow Hubble speaking. Hello, Winslow. This is Charles Walker. Huh, Chuck Walker. That's a name from the past. I heard the smirk in his voice. The leather seat creaked as he leaned back. What do you want, Chuck? Do you have some money you want to invest? Winslow must have known my little nest egg was smaller than the rounding error for most of Pierce, Bateman's clients. Jerk. No, I'm fine now, Vinny. I smiled, knowing the nickname would make him wince. I thought it was high time you and I had a talk. Winslow snorted. Well, I can't imagine what we could talk about, Cook. I mean, Chuck. It's not like we revolve in the same circles. He chuckled discreetly. Or that you fly around a lot at all. I can't imagine why I should want to have a drink with you. Well, Vinny, here's the thing. You still have a wife, and I still have a video. And I suppose I should tell you a little about my ex-wife and me. I'm Charles. Chuck Walker, a former journalist who now makes his money editing blank articles about the charitable work of Polylever, a very large and very famous corporation. It's not the most enjoyable job, but it pays well. The people here are nice, and it helps provide me with something better in retirement than cat food and a short-term heroin addiction. As for Ashley, she's an investment banker working on Wall Street. Unlike the tarnished idealism that gives my office a somewhat hypocritical tinge, Pierce, Bateman firmly believes that money creates its own morality. Simply put, if it's profitable, then it's good. Despite our different jobs, Ash and I were a perfect match. We were both in our 30s, old enough to seriously consider having children, but young enough not to think about it too seriously. I was 5'6", brown-eyed and green-haired, in good shape, which I maintained by going to the gym 3 times a week and walking 10 miles a day. Ash was 5'6", with dark brown hair, sharp blue eyes, and a body that haunted my dreams both before and after marriage. We met at a We Were Promised Jetpacks concert in Brooklyn, where she spilled beer on my third favorite t-shirt and I took her number. I talked to her a lot that night. We skipped a show by a Scottish reggae band and sipped beer in a little smoking area outside. I'd been around the New York dating scene long enough to know that she was something special, beautiful and brilliant, with a playful sense of humor and a direct, non-apologetic tone that invariably caught me off guard. I later learned that she was the youngest of 5 children with 4 older brothers who shared her directness and mischievousness. The following weekend, we agreed to go to the Muppets exhibit at the Museum of the Moving Image, and I found that the humor and intelligence I saw during our first meeting persisted even after my beer goggles were gone. If anything, she was even more impressive when I was sober enough to recognize the nuances of her subtle acrimony. 6 months later, she had my ring. A year later, we were married. That was 4 years ago. Keeping a marriage alive in a big city isn't easy, and we both worked hard at it. I knew that Ash sometimes stayed late at the office, and she knew that I sometimes had to run to meet a deadline or finish one of the articles I was writing on the side. We tried to coordinate subway rides and organize lunches, but some days we only saw each other for a few minutes in the morning and an hour or two in the evening. Nevertheless, we tried not to miss a weekend, texted to stay in touch, and never forget important dates or anniversaries, even silly ones like Spilled Beer Day and First Real Date Day. I learned that Ash was a chameleon. In museums, she was smart and erudite, but also not snotty. On hikes in the Adirondacks, she was tough and competitive, oblivious to the scrapes and abrasions she got chasing me down the trail. As we dated, lived together, married, and settled into our lives, she discovered new sides of herself. Wisecracking in humor, vulnerable in caring. It was as if she made a gift of those parts, offering them to me when I least expected it. At work, the chameleon Ash let her predatory side shine through. I could see hints of her every Thursday night at Pierce and Bateman's weekly get-togethers. The firm routinely rented a back room at the Three Olives, a prim establishment in the financial district with enough burgundy leather chairs, hunter prints, and bland British cuisine to trouble even the most dedicated Anglophile. While weekly attendance was not officially required, not showing up, especially with a spouse on hand, meant admitting you didn't care enough to work on advancing your career. So, every Thursday night, I made small talk with Ashley's fellow Financial Wars colleagues, absorbed gossip from her office, and watched her work the crowd. Most of Ashley's co-workers were smug former students, and many of their spouses were lacquered blondes who had studied art or early childhood education in college and were looking for husbands with serious earnings. I tried to blend in, but you can get so caught up in a conversation about rooftop bars and Jimmy Choo shoes that you want to eat a bullet afterward. Luckily, Martha, call me Marty Hubble, came to my rescue. At first glance, Winslow Hubble's better half looked like another voracious, bleached and varnished Pierce Bateman wife. My notions of her crumbled one evening, however, when Abby Van Wharton told me about her husband's new hobby, curling, a Canadian game in which you have to push granite discs across an ice-covered surface. "Okay, let's get this straight," Martha muttered. "Is she bragging that her husband from Blue England is spending a fortune to learn a game played by redneck Canadians?" I looked back and saw a smirk playing across her face. Martha, I realized, had thrown her version of a colloquial Hail Mary, a salvo designed to figure out if I was a fellow traveler or just another one of those living in the pod. "Rednecks or Rockefellers, inbreeding seems to be universal," I muttered back. "Still, it's a dangerous game. It's hard to play polo when you have your eyes closed all the time." We headed off to the races. Marty, I learned, was like Martha Stewart, from her single-mindedness to her dry, Mojave-like sense of humor. Like the great Mrs. Stewart, Martha Hubble, née Petrowski, started life from humble beginnings, working her way from a working-class Pittsburgh neighborhood to a well-known college and, eventually, to a promising marriage to a man whose Anglo-Saxon surname was little more prestigious than her Polish-Lithuanian one. She had a job at a well-known publishing house where she had already made a name for herself, but it was thought to be only a matter of time before she quit and started putting out little hubbles. During endless happy hours, Pierce, Bateman, Marty, and I would usually find each other in some corner where we would exchange witty comments and pass the time over a game of Nazi haircut bingo. Essentially, you scan a crowd of New Yorkers picking out different haircuts of Goering, Heydrich, Goebbels, and Hitler. In a place like Three Olives, teeming with testosterone and expensive hair care products, well, let's just say it was a target-rich environment. While Marty and I bickered quietly, our spouses worked the crowd. They went off in different directions. Ashley, who was still paying off her student loans, spent most of her time sipping club sodas and using her brains and candor to make introductions to guys in really nice suits. Meanwhile, Winslow, who probably celebrated most of his childhood birthdays at the yacht club or the 19th hole, spent his time sipping gin and tonics and telling lewd jokes to his former fraternity brothers. It was hard not to notice the difference in class. Ash was trying to work her way into the lifestyle Winslow took for granted, while he was adrift, confident that if he failed, there was always another brother, another investment firm, another cocktail party, and if gossip was to be believed, if he failed, he could always go back to mom, dad, and a fat paycheck managing the family fund. Those were our Thursdays. Ash swam the happy hour waters like a big white fish, Vinny splashed around like a happy little seal, and Marty and I drank cocktails, watched shows, and devoured gossip like a couple of quiet anemones. It wasn't my favorite way to spend my free time, but Ash was happy and Marty was fun, so I didn't complain too much about having to put on a suit and amuse my wife. Our marriage was a balancing act of two young people with a job that was too demanding and a bond that was too important to give up. It was a marriage of quiet admiration, principles, and compromise, the kind that young couples have when they come to terms and lay the groundwork for a lucrative career, a home, children, and the rest of the American dream. It was hard, but we worked at it, and it worked for us. That's not to say it was easy. Ashley was prone to jealousy, which I found outrageous considering how attractive she was. On the other hand, I had my own problems with the green-eyed monster. In a city of 8 million people where the fear of missing out on a better deal was as much a part of life as subway rides and dirty water hot dogs, I found it hard to believe my wife had settled on me. And it was strange that she thought so highly of me. A much bigger problem was Ashley's sense of fairness. In the office, her morals were flexible, a necessary characteristic if you want to make your way on Wall Street. But in Ashley's personal life, her sense of right and wrong was rigid and unwavering. When she felt she was being wronged, Ash was quick to seek revenge, and her revenge was, at least in my opinion, convoluted, secretive, and diabolical. It usually went like this. After Ash was convinced that she had been treated unfairly, she would confront the offender and make her case, often in a heightened tone of voice. A sincere apology or several apologies, and some form of repentance could restore balance to the universe. But if the offender continued to claim innocence or was insufficiently remorseful, Ashley's inner vigilante stepped in. Outwardly, Ashley let the argument die down, and life seemed to go on as usual. But deep down, she was hard at work, weighing the evidence, passing judgment, and calmly imposing the punishment she deemed appropriate. There was no appeals court, no stay of execution, no higher powers. When Ashley reached her verdict, she needed no outside validation that she had done the right thing, and she rejected any argument that she had gone too far. Sometimes I wondered where Ashley's sense of justice came from. I assumed it was a consequence of her childhood, when a little girl was sometimes at the mercy of 4 huge brothers. Direct confrontation was futile, and complaining to her parents would have resulted in her being labeled a nerd, a devastating insult in a house full of boys. I can easily imagine little Ashley coming up with worthy punishments for her brothers and then implementing them. And with 4 rambunctious boys in the house, who would suspect an angelic little sister? Ashley's early years as a partisan may also explain why her punishments often seemed excessive. By my calculations, for every pound of crime, she usually imposed 1.5 pounds of punishment. Sometimes I thought she still saw herself as a powerless little sister, fighting secret battles with her older brothers. Or maybe that extra 50% was the legal fees she charged as payback for her time as judge, jury, and executioner. Here's an example. One Sunday, a few months after we were married, Ash and I were cleaning up our apartment, sweeping out the trash that had accumulated in closets and corners. gathering clothes for Goodwill, and saying goodbye to the college textbooks we were finally ready to admit we would never read again. By the time we were done, the living room was littered with bags and boxes, and I was hauling trash to the dumpster on the corner and to Goodwill a block away. All seemed well in Walker Country as we pondered the new space in our closets and bookshelves. 40 minutes later, I was lying on the couch clutching a beer in my hands, and Ashley was hovering over me, almost vibrating with rage. It seemed that the bag that was supposed to go to the dry cleaners was somehow missing. After finding out that it wasn't in the garbage can and that Goodwill wasn't willing to let us wander around the warehouse looking for it, my wife was left utterly frustrated and had no one to vent her anger on but me. Apparently, I hadn't inspected the bags closely enough when I carried them out of the apartment, and now Ash was missing 3 dresses. I apologized. What else was I supposed to do? But it was like trying to fight a forest fire with a handful of sand. After the third apology, I drank the rest of my beer, told my wife I needed to be alone, and went for a long walk. When I returned a few hours later, there were 3 new dresses in the closet and Ash was asleep. The next morning when I woke up, Ashley was gone. I did my morning chores and started getting dressed for work. The process stopped when I realized I didn't have any pants. Not in my closet, not in the laundry room, there weren't even any suit pants. I texted Ash, "Honey, have you seen my pants? I can't find them." The reply came immediately, "Check Goodwill." Fighting a wave of rage, I finally found a pair of dark sweatpants in my gym bag. Not ideal, but I was running late, and they would last until lunch before I ran into Uniqlo. When I got home that night, I had 3 new pairs of pants. As I put them away in my closet, Ashley watched me with a strangely satisfied expression in her eyes. After that, I went for another walk. Simply put, I couldn't spend another minute in the same apartment with her. Final tally. 3 dresses lost to honest confusion and 12 pairs of pants, including 2 irreplaceable pairs of suit pants, sacrificed to divine justice. I don't know what scale Ashley used, but it seemed to me that the punishment far outweighed the crime. For the first time in our young marriage, I began to wonder if I had made a mistake. It was several days before we regained our mutual understanding. Ashley never apologized, but my stony silence seemed to impress her. Over the next few nights, she brought home dinner, working her way through my favorite restaurants. On Wednesday, I discovered J. Crew. I had enough pants that night to last me for a week, and when I went to happy hour at Pierce, Bateman's on Thursday, she greeted me with a huge hug. It seemed like we were back. Besides teaching me to be very careful when checking trash bags before taking them to the curb, the pants episode taught me an important lesson about Ashley's revenge. Although she seemed to derive a sense of satisfaction from being an instrument of divine retribution, her actions did not bring her joy. She treated revenge as a grim obligation rather than a hobby, something to be endured, if only as a means of fixing the world. In the case of my 10 pairs of missing pants, that duty was worth about $500, not counting my now incomplete suits. We weren't short of money, but replacing clothes undermined our finances for a month or two. Still, she stoically accepted our situation as if the cost of our new closet was a tithe or a tax we had to pay to move on with our lives. Ashley never paid for the missing pants again, but every now and then I would see the odd, satisfied look flicker across her face. Usually, at the moment I discovered something odd, like salt in my cereal, or that the book I was reading had somehow disappeared. Eventually, I accepted it as part of our life together. I had my quirks, like a firm belief that peanut butter should be kept in the refrigerator. And Ashley had her quirks, like a psychotic need for violent revenge. But I reasoned, when you love someone, you accept them whole. I'd learned to apologize if possible, but I also didn't want to live in fear of my wife's temper. So there were times when I ducked down, battened down the hatches, and waited for the hurricane vengeance to sweep through the apartment. We found a balance, and most of the time it suited us. Until Caitlin showed up. Next chapter. Let me start by saying that I didn't hire Caitlin. That decision was made by people 3 or 4 rungs higher up the food chain, through a mysterious vetting method that I'm sure involves drawing a pentagram and slaughtering a goat. I participated in one of a series of vetting sessions in which I pointed out that her journalistic experience and ability to write top-notch stories under tight deadlines put her an order of magnitude above other applicants. The HR people listened to my group's feedback, thanked us for our time, and left. Needless to say, I was surprised when they took our advice and hired her. Neither Caitlin's impressive resume nor my non-participation in her hiring impressed Ashley when they met at a weekend run organized at work. The problem was that in addition to being a highly skilled writer-editor, Caitlin was also stunning. Ash and Caitlin did girl stuff, complimented each other on their running clothes and sneakers, and chatted about the weather. To an outsider, it might have seemed like a perfectly banal exchange between a wife and her husband's coworker, but I noticed Ashley frowning, which didn't bode well for my marital harmony. When we returned to the apartment after lunch, Ash was uncharacteristically silent. I knew what was coming. She was silently marinating in her anger, festering and fermenting, ready to explode. Realizing I needed to nip this in the bud or I risked going pantsless again, I had just restocked my supply to 7 pairs and hoped they would last for a long time. I spoke up. I'm glad you finally got to meet Caitlin. You two seem to be hitting it off. Yes, Charles. She's beautiful, my wife murmured. Where have you been hiding her? Charles. Not a good sign. Hit it, sweetheart? I smiled. We don't socialize too much with my coworkers. In fact, I think today was the first time you met half of them. Nonsense. I saw them all at the Christmas party. I kept the smile on my face. That was 8 months ago, Ash. Hell, half the office has already moved, relocated, or moved on. Or, in Caitlin's case, hired on. She frowned. And what were her qualifications? BA in English at Brown, majoring in business writing, 5 years in journalism, another 3 years in digital marketing. Pretty much the same as mine. I grinned. Except for Brown, of course. At this rate, she'll soon be my boss. Her tone softened a little, but her gait was still stiff like an attack dog on high alert. So you'll be working under her? I glanced around. There was still steel in Ash's eyes, but she was smiling. Thank God, I thought. Of course not, honey. I smiled back. You're the only woman I obey, and I wouldn't call it work. Ash's grin grew even wider, and when we got back to the apartment, we got down to business. The next couple weeks went pretty smoothly, though it took quite a while before the tension disappeared. Ash never initiated conversations about Caitlin, and I tried to do the same. I suppose it's a standard move for cheaters to never mention the other woman, but in my case, I just wanted to avoid upsetting the apple cart. I felt like it worked, and that I had somehow managed to dodge the bullet. Meanwhile, work went on as usual, at least until the end of October. Every year, my company puts out a huge report on its projects around the world. No matter how much work we do or how many emails we send out, the project managers of various charities inevitably wait until the last minute to send in their reports. This means that my team and I have to work a week or two of early mornings, late nights, and canceled weekends to get everything done. We call it Hell Week. Figuratively, I know. Did I mention we're writers? When Hell Week came around, things pretty much went back to normal for Ash and me. That Monday, my usual 8-hour workday turned into a 12-hour editing marathon, and by the time I got home, I felt like I was held together with rubber bands and duct tape. All I could think about was a hot shower and a warm bed. I definitely didn't have the energy to fight Ashley. She pounced on me before I even took off my coat. Where the hell have you been? What? I paused, tearing off one sleeve. Didn't you get my messages? You mean the one message you sent 6 freaking hours ago? I wondered. Had it really been 6 hours since I'd sent Ashley a text reminding her that I'd be late at the office? Honestly, I couldn't remember. Even in my dazed state, I realized that I had 2 options. Get into an argument with Ashley that would likely end with me falling asleep on the couch, or try to defuse the situation, get to bed, and fall asleep. Has it really been that long? I asked uncertainly, finishing taking off my coat and digging through my closet looking for a hanger. I'm sorry, I lost track of time. She taps her foot. That wasn't good. I'm sure you did. I sigh. Remember when I told you it was going to be a hell of a week, Ash? That my team was going to spend all day and more trying to put together an annual report? Tap, tap, tap. Remember when I asked you to keep in touch so I'd know about dinner? Shit. Yeah, shit, I'm sorry, Ash. It was crazy and I couldn't keep checking my phone all the time. It's going to be like that all week. Tap, tap, tap. Was she there? Shit. The whole team was there all day, including Caitlin, I said. I looked Ashley straight in the eye, with all the sincerity I was capable of, considering my eyelids felt like they weighed 40 pounds each. Ash, I'm really sorry I didn't stop by to see you. I've spent the last 12 hours putting out fires, and frankly, it's going to be like this until we meet our deadline next Thursday. That's 8 days. 10. Remember last year when I had to work all weekend? I'll have to do it again this year. I slumped my shoulders. I needed to go to bed. Ash, I'm sorry, but it's part of my job. It was part of my job long before Caitlin was hired, and it will be part of my job after she leaves. She's leaving? The knocking stopped. I chuckled dryly. In time. You know how it is. Team members get reassigned all the time and they leave. The only reason they haven't reassigned me is because they don't have anyone else to edit the articles and run the website. Ashley furrowed her eyebrows again. But for now, you'll still be working with her. Yes, my love. I'm still working with Caitlin, and with Aaron and Kim and Jake and Brandon and the rest of the team. And that's all I do. We reached a compromise. Ashley allowed herself to be reassured, and I agreed to respond to her messages with due promptness. She wanted immediate answers, but I talked her into giving me 10 minutes of freedom. It was a classic compromise, but neither of us was particularly happy with it. I had to be on an electronic leash during the most difficult time of the year, and she had to deal with her jealousy. When we went to bed, she was still looking at me with a slightly stern look. A fragile peace reigned in our apartment. At work, I felt like I was constantly being pulled between Ashley's insecurities and the pile of editing that was growing no matter how fast my team and I worked. I knew from experience the previous year that eventually we'd reach a tipping point and the tide would begin to ebb, but that was almost a week away. In the meantime, Ashley was pushing the text to the limit. At least 10 times a day a message would pop up and I would have to take my mind off my business to respond to it. Usually I just had to put off editing for a minute, but a couple times she'd send a text in the middle of a meeting, and I'd have to scribble a quick reply under my desk, hoping no one would notice what I was doing. Her messages were always innocuous. Little notes like, "How are you doing?" or "Hope all is well." But the meaning was clear. I was being watched. The timing was consistent too. Sometimes Ashley would start writing a few minutes after I arrived at the office, and sometimes she'd wait an hour or so. Sometimes they followed each other, and sometimes hours passed in between. I felt like she was playing Battleship with me, hoping to catch me in an unguarded moment while Caitlin and I had a quickie in a closet somewhere. It would have gone on like that for the rest of Hell Week, but I made a mistake. My phone charger at home was on its last legs and only worked if I stuck the cord under the phone and pulled it tight. It was an easy fix. All I had to do was buy a new cord. But it happened during Hell Week, and between Ashley and the annual report, I didn't have enough working brain cells to deal with another problem. As a result, when I got to the office Friday morning, my phone was at 7%. Normally, I would have plugged it in as soon as I sat down at my desk, but barely had I gotten my coat off before Jake came running in with the latest problems and I got right to work. By the time I came up for air, it was about 12. My cell phone was dead. In hindsight, the horror of realizing I'd been out of contact for hours should have been a wake-up call, but I'd been with Ashley for 4 years now, and the frog was on its way to boiling over. My pounding heart and growing sense of panic when I plugged in my phone didn't even seem strange. Damn. The phone's battery was dead, and it took almost a minute to get enough charge to start up. My pulse was pounding in my ears. Shit. The phone emitted a quick vibrating beep, starting the download, followed by several vibrating beeps heralding the arrival of a pile of messages. Damn. The messages quickly changed from an innocuous, "Hey babe, what's up?" to an angry, "Where the hell are you, Charles?" to an angry, "You have 5 minutes to answer your damn phone." Damn. I quickly hit the dial button, but got 2 rings and then her answering machine. She was checking my calls. I tried again and got the same result. The third time I left a message explaining what happened. I then sent a message with the same, albeit abbreviated, explanation. No response. Another, shorter message. No response. At this point, I was torn between running to her office to plead my case and going back to work. In one case, I would preserve marital harmony. In the other case, I would keep my job, which was very important because after she kicked me out, I would definitely need a paycheck to pay my rent. Anyway, I had to wait about half an hour for my phone to charge enough, After the last batch of messages, there's no way I'm leaving my desk without my electronic umbilical cord. While I waited, I tried to get back to editing, but my brain was blocked and my heart was still pounding in my chest. I thought about the fact that no matter what I did, I couldn't guarantee that Ashley would back down. There was something wrong with this, I realized. Despite my determination not to become hostage to my wife's temper and her strange sense of justice, this was exactly what had happened. Here I was, in the middle of the hardest week of the entire work year, and I couldn't concentrate because I'd missed a couple messages and I was afraid my wife might explode. Something was wrong with this picture. I wondered how to express it to Ash. What could I say? How could I explain that I couldn't live in fear of her temper, or that her thirst for revenge could destroy our marriage? I thought about sending a text message, but immediately discarded the idea. This was a conversation that needed to be had face to face, perhaps in a therapist's office. I was contemplating how to broach the subject when another text message came in. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. Oh my God. I nearly had a heart attack and Ashley had spent the last 3 messages trying to make me feel bad. It certainly wasn't okay. It's hard to understand the emotion from the text, but I figured either Ash realized she was acting crazy and let me off the hook, or, more likely, she'd found me guilty of some crime and was already planning my punishment. And then something else hit me. Whatever Ashley's message meant, there was nothing I could do about it. Going to her office was risky, and trying to talk her out of it with a text message was a fool's errand. I realized I could only wait out the coming storm and hope that when it was over, my marriage and my closet wouldn't be too badly damaged. Next chapter. I tried really hard to leave work early, but by the time I got home it was 8:30, and like every other night that week, I was shattered. Standing in front of my apartment door, I took a deep breath, pulled myself together, and stepped inside. "Honey, I'm home," I called out. "In the kitchen." The voice was normal, and I allowed myself some optimism. Maybe it wouldn't be as bad as I thought. On the other hand, her cheerful voice raised some concerns. Why didn't she get more upset? Had she already started her revenge? Would my dinner be full of laxatives? Ipecac? Pills? Hanging up my coat and taking off my shoes, I prepared to attack. But instead, I was greeted by Ashley with a relaxed smile on her face. "Welcome home, sweetie," she chirped, hugging me. What was going on? I was still in damage control mode. "Hi, my love. I'm sorry I missed your messages today. My phone battery died and—" She grinned. "Don't worry about it, love. You explained everything in your message." But she reached up and kissed me again. No buts. Mistakes happen. I picked up a new cord on my way home from work. Who was this woman, and what had she done to my wife? In retrospect, I probably should have investigated further, but it was almost 9. I had just gotten home after 12 hours of work, and having barely prevented one heart attack, I didn't want to provoke another. I gave up with a sigh of relief. "Thanks, Ash. I'll make sure my phone is charged tomorrow." She smiled broadly again. "See to it, babe." Ash and I agreed that she would have dinner on Hell Week. She ordered Chinese takeout, and I nibbled on it for a while, but the day had knocked me out, and I didn't immediately find myself dozing over my plate. "It's time for me to go to bed," I said. "Are you coming?" She bestowed a bright smile on me again. "Maybe in a little while. I'm going to do some reading." "Okay." I made my way to the bathroom, performed my ablutions, and fell into bed. As I dozed off, I noticed that there was a slight odor of something in the air. Maybe Febreze? Before I could think about it, sleep took me away. The next day was Saturday, but I still had to go to the office. I got up, showered, and dressed quietly. Before leaving the bedroom, I glanced over at Ashley lying on the bed. Curled up in a fetal position and wrapped up in the soft yellow sheets, she looked so peaceful. It was another of her chameleon faces, the soft, vulnerable woman I wanted to protect. She looked nothing like the tough financial analyst in the dark pantsuit or the confident wife I'd seen the night before, with a satisfied look in her eyes. Wait a minute. Satisfied? I felt my good mood deflate. Shit. I shook my head. No need to cause trouble where there wasn't any. I told myself that my pants weren't missing, my clothes were intact, and I shouldn't take on tomorrow's worries when I already had a hard day ahead of me. And yet I kept coming back to that look in her eyes. Was it real? Ash only texted me 4 messages that day, and I tried to respond to them quickly. They were all fun and light, no yelling or swearing, and she seemed pleased with my responses. When I got home that night, everything seemed normal, mostly normal, and at the Greek restaurant she was served chicken with lemon. She often ordered takeout, but I wasn't going to fight about it. I searched Ashley's eyes for that satisfied glint. Maybe it was there. I wasn't sure. As tired as I was, I felt like I was imagining things. In the bedroom, I could smell Febreze again. "Honey, it smells weird in here. Did you spray something?" "Yes. I think one of the neighbors was smoking. The smell was really strong." "Weird. A couple of the neighbors smoked weed, but we usually smelled it in the hallway, not the bedroom." I shrugged my shoulders. Mystery solved. Sunday morning went the same way. We woke up at 6, showered, and dressed in silence. I looked at Ashley, who was lying on the pale green sheets, looking like a mermaid or Botticelli's Venus, though dressed in a flannel nightgown. I kissed her and left for the office. Later it occurred to me, the sheets were yellow on Saturday and green on Sunday. I shrugged. We changed the sheets fairly regularly, but we didn't stick to any particular schedule. Ash probably just decided it was time to change the sheets. That night was the same. Food from the corner diner, notes of Febreze, and unbroken sleep. Maybe it was the smug look on her face. The next morning, a quiet shower, a silent goodbye, and a kiss from my wife, dead asleep and snuggled on the white sheets. I was at work that day. Shit, white sheets. And I couldn't think of a single reason Ashley would change the sheets 2 days in a row. Or rather, not a single reason I wanted to think of. Add to that the smell of Febreze and maybe a satisfied look, and it looked like Ash was stepping up her revenge game. If she was doing what I thought she was doing, it went far beyond disappearing pants, all the way to causing irreparable damage to marital life. For a moment I wondered if I really wanted to know the truth, but realized that this was a case where ignorance was not bliss. I couldn't live with my suspicions, and, if they were true, I was sure I couldn't live with my wife. Before I could doubt myself, I did a little research and placed an order on Amazon. $26 later, with expedited shipping included, a pair of spy cameras was already flying to me. I prayed that my suspicions would turn out to be wrong. That night, Moroccan takeout, Febreze, and rose-colored sheets. The satisfied look was definitely there. I looked in the laundry basket, but it was empty. Shit, shit, shit. On Monday, the wave of editing ebbed and flowed, then receded. The queue of stories began to dwindle. The end was near. At 11, the post office received a message that my package had arrived. By noon, work had slowed a bit and my team barely looked up when I said I had to run to a meeting. The cameras were disguised as a smoke detector and alarm clock, and installing them in my bedroom wasn't difficult. Ash texted 5 times that day. At 5:15, I got a text that the cameras were activated. Apparently, my wife had gotten home early. An hour later, I received the last text from Ashley for the day. I wanted to know the truth, but if the video was what I thought it was beginning a process I hoped I would never have to go through. I sat down to work and decided I wouldn't watch the video until the next day. If my marriage was over, the end could wait until another night. I texted Ash to let her know I would be home at 8:30. I wondered if she would be angry, but I couldn't bring myself to care that much. My emotions were muted and hazy, as if I was feeling them through a fog. At 8 o'clock, I stumbled my way home. That night, takeout pizza, Febreze, a satisfied smile, yellow sheets again. This made sense, since we only had 4 sets of bedding. It also explained yesterday's trip to the laundromat. Curled up in bed, I realized that no matter what happened, I never wanted to smell Febreze again. The next morning, Ash lay curled up in bed, glistening in the morning sunlight. I stared at her for a long time. I'm going to miss this. Between insomnia and fear, I was still in a deep fog. I embraced it. When it dissipated, I realized an ocean of pain awaited me. Things have mostly settled down at work. It would probably be another 2 or 3 days before we were done, but we had already seen the light at the end of the tunnel. At 11, I told the team I was going to a quiet corner, a conference room that the company had set up with couches, chairs, and a couple of small tables. It was essentially the corporate version of a student lounge. It was also the only place where I could watch videos from my bedroom in relative privacy. The only other person there was Kim. one of my coworkers. She was ensconced in a chair by the window, fully immersed in her laptop. I settled down on the couch at the far end of the room. If the video showed what I expected, I wanted to be with my back to the wall. I planned to listen to the video, not watch it. I reasoned that if I saw Ashley with another man, it would be impossible to forgive her, and I didn't want to close off all possibilities for myself before I realized what I was dealing with. So I put on my headphones, turned on the smoke detector video, and hid the screen. From the sounds of it, it was as bad as I suspected. The camera was motion activated, so it started recording when they entered the room. Somewhere in the middle, I recognized a voice. It was Winslow, Hubble be damned. I was crushed, yes, but also confused. I looked up to the clock on the wall. I stared dumbly at the numbers, at the second hand running down the dial. Only 20 minutes had passed since the video had started. My brain stuck on the number, repeated it. 20 minutes. 20 minutes. 20 minutes. 20 minutes to end my marriage. 20 minutes. I realized I couldn't go home this night, or any night in the near future. Given what I'd seen, I'd have to face her. And given that she believed my alleged infidelity and was desperate for justice, there was no telling what her reaction would be. What's the right way to avenge a divorce? And what would it look like with an additional 50% added on? The only question was when I should warn her. The angel on one shoulder voted to right her immediately. He proclaimed that the quality of mercy is stress-free, that forgiveness is divine, and that I should let her know before she screwed Winslow again. The devil on my other shoulder whispered that if I didn't want to punish her, that didn't mean I shouldn't let her punish me. At 5:20, my phone vibrated. At 6:30, I sent her a text message, complete with video clips. I told her I would stay with Aaron, one of my coworkers. 2 days later, I began divorce proceedings. Next chapter. I felt nothing but contempt for Winslow Hubble. From conversations with Marty and the gossip I gathered during happy hours, I realized how his wealth and privilege had protected him over the years. Simply put, every time Vinny got into trouble, it was his prep school friends, fraternity brothers, and Dad's checkbook that solved the problem. I thought through all the usual revenge scenarios and realized that none of them would work. If I attacked him openly, his parents would make sure the reverberations would destroy me and possibly Ash. As for Winslow, he would likely continue to be a happy seal, oblivious to the destruction he was scattering in his wake. The problem plagued me. How do you punish the man who has everything? Lying in bed at night, I thought back to Winslow's dialogue in the video. His comments about me sucking up, about him being superior, his need to know he was better than me. And that's when I realized I could learn something from Winslow Hubble. It would take time and a lot of research, but what the hell? I didn't spend any more nights at home with my wife. I called him 6 months later. Winslow agreed to meet me at the Three Olives, where they had parties on Thursdays. I did everything I wasn't supposed to do. I picked a bar that Winslow knew where he would be perfectly comfortable. I arrived 5 minutes late to give him time to get a seat and order his first drink. I figured he'd be wearing one of the suits his parents' tailor had made for him, so I chose comfortable jeans, a blue blazer, and a white plaid shirt. He was shaved and groomed, so I left his hair a little disheveled and didn't bother to shave off the 5 o'clock shadow. Winslow considered me beneath him, and I wanted to do everything in my power to reinforce that impression. When I approached the table, Winslow was dressed exactly as I'd envisioned. Tie with a pompous Windsor knot, pinstripe suit, wide canvas shirt from Brooks Brothers, cufflinks. His eyes from under my sweatshirt slid over my casual clothes, taking in every detail. He saw himself in the host chair of a power bar, sitting across from the man he'd defeated. He felt untouchable, just like I wanted him to be. He didn't get up to greet me. "Winslow," I said, taking off my backpack and sitting down. "Chucky," he smiled. "It's been a while." "Yeah, it's been a while. Give me a second." I beckoned to the waitress and handed her my order while Winslow glared at me. Apparently, members of the lower classes shouldn't ignore their elders by ordering a gin and tonic. When she left, I turned to him again. "Winnie, thanks for coming." He blushed at that nickname. "I don't have much time," he snapped. "And why am I here?" "Well, to be honest, there was something I needed to find out." He grinned, twirled the martini glass in his hands. "I figured a divorce would do it." "Yeah, it definitely ended things between me and Ash." I nodded at him. However, you and I still have unfinished business. Winslow chuckled. I can't imagine what that might be. Your wife has decided to try another man. He smirked. A better man. And you just couldn't resist. Why should I have? Ashley's a beautiful woman. His eyes sparkled. And she's so good in the bedroom. Besides, from what she says, you didn't give her what she needed. We'll get back to that later. After I found out about the two of you, I started thinking about revenge. In Ashley's case, it was simple. We divorced and I haven't seen her since. We had a beautiful marriage and she ruined it. She's going to have to live with that. I took a sip of my drink. On the other hand, it was harder with you. What are you talking about? Here's the thing, Fluffy. You're protected. Suppose I do the obvious thing and beat you to a pulp. His eyes widened and he slowly removed his hands from the table. I have no doubt I could do it, and I'm sure it would be great fun. But I'll barely have time to wash the blood off my hands before your parents lock me up. I lowered my gaze to my hands resting in his lap. Besides, you're probably the kind of wuss that mom and dad make you carry around a panic button, in which case I'll be lucky if I manage to land a few punches before the hired security guards plow me to the floor. Winston blushed and defiantly put his hands back on the table. He took a sip from his glass, a big gulp. So you're not going to try to beat me up? No. Maybe I can even save up some money and find a real professional to make you disappear? I tried not to smirk at the look on his face. I needed to look serious. But then I'll run into the same problem. Your parents will undoubtedly hire a bunch of investigators, and then I'll have to worry about any evidence my hitman leaves behind. Sooner or later, he'll get caught, he'll jump me, and then I'll end up in jail, this time with a murder charge and a few thousand less to spend on my legal defense. Why not just leave it at that? I'm sure I can. I interrupted him. I've been thinking about revenge. I could send a video of you to your friends, your parents, your job. Winslow started to turn slightly green. But what would be the point of that? Your parents already know what you are. They've been cleaning up after you for years. Besides, once mom and dad find out about my attempts to besmirch your good name, I snorted. Well, I guess my days at my current job are numbered. As for my next job, I suppose it will involve the phrase, "Would you like fries?" Winslow leaned forward. So you're going to leave it at that? Not exactly. I pulled a folder out of my backpack and placed it on the table. I realized there was one thing I could do. But before we get to that, have you ever thought about how much your parents protected you? I don't think so. I pulled some pictures out of the folder and placed them face down. When I was planning my revenge, I did a lot of research. It's amazing what you can find when you have a lot of time and a bottomless well of anger. For example, do you remember Mary Gray and Danielle Brennan? A look of shock flashed across Winslow's face, but he did his best to restrain himself. I don't remember. I may have met them in college. I snorted. Don't be modest, Winnie. You did a lot more than just meet them. In fact, you're the reason they both dropped out and came home. I flipped over the first picture. It showed a pale, black-haired woman with a toddler in her arms. Maybe this will help you remember. Mary had a baby about 6 months after graduation. He looks a lot like you. At least he did before he dropped the baby fat. You'll be happy to know that she graduated from community college. From what she posts on Facebook, the two of them are doing well. He hummed, but droplets of sweat appeared on his forehead. There's no way you can prove this baby is mine, he stammered. Don't worry, Mary won't testify against you. On the other hand, young William didn't sign a non-disclosure agreement, and his DNA is ironclad proof of paternity. I raised an eyebrow at him. I wouldn't plan on going into politics. Winslow's face reddened and he started to look a little stiff. So this is your revenge? He pouted. Speculation and innuendo? Sit tight, Winnie. We've only just begun. I flipped the other picture over. This one wasn't as cheerful. The woman in it had blonde hair, depressed cheeks, squinted eyes. Danielle was harder to deal with. In fact, I was only able to talk to her parents. It seems that after she graduated from high school, she became depressed. She almost killed herself. He turned pale. There's no way you hold me responsible for that. Well, you and a few of your fraternity brothers. Of course, there's no proof. She disappeared somehow, and I believe she signed a non-disclosure agreement. But we both know what you did to her. He pushed away from the table as if afraid to touch the photos, afraid they would burn him. You can't prove anything. Not in court, no. I stared at him until he looked away. But we both know what you did, Vinny. You know she hasn't dated anyone since you? She's afraid to go out like her mom says. She says she still wakes up screaming. Winslow jumped to his feet. Who knew he could move so fast? I don't have to listen to this, he hissed. I'm leaving. Not so fast, I said. I pulled one of the flash drives out of my pocket and tapped it on the table. Sit down, Vinny, I snapped back. Finish your drink. Order another one. We still have a lot to talk about. And you still have more to lose. Go ahead, tell that to my boss, he laughed. His voice sounded high and hollow. Hell, go ahead and tell that to Marty. She won't leave me. Maybe. Maybe not. Maybe she'll want to talk to Danielle. Of course, she doesn't have that name anymore. I stared at him, hard. Your parents really put the fear of God into her. Winnie lowered himself into a chair. You have 10 minutes, he muttered. He loosened his tie and undid the top button. His collar was wet. Cut the crap, Winnie. I've got as much time as I want because you've got a lot to lose, and so do I. I caught his gaze and he turned away again, faster this time. Don't wave me off, buddy. We're just getting started. Looking at the way he was breathing, almost crying, I thought about Ash for a second. I wonder if she felt the same way when she started her revenge. I could see how one could become addicted to it. I took another breath, moving on to part 2. Funny you should mention your job, Winnie. You're right. They wouldn't fire you for Mary and Danielle. Hell, they wouldn't even fire you for Ashley, even though it would be really hard on her. Unlike you, she needs a job. And unlike you, she's not untouchable. If your little afternoon delight got out, she'd be destroyed. And you, of course, would go free. I grinned. Hell, if it hadn't been for the bank robbery, you'd probably be at Pierce Bateman's until they carried you out on a stretcher. What are you talking about? He crossed his arms. I think he was trying to look stern, but from where I was standing, it looked like he was trying to cover his soft underbelly. It wouldn't work. Winslow was all about the soft underbelly. You don't know? I stirred my gin and tonic. Don't you remember the Goldfarb account? What was in it? You lost $500,000 because of a mistake an intern would have noticed. Didn't you ever wonder why you weren't fired? Brave's face wrinkled. It wasn't my fault. The secretary... I twitched my hand. Yes, the secretary took the blame. You'll be happy to know she got a reward for it and an excellent reference. She's now working at Babbitt and Gallum. She seems happy too. All right, Chucky, he said. If you know so much, tell me why I didn't get fired. Did he really not know? I studied his face. Isn't it obvious, Vinny? Who's always looking out for you? Who always saves your ass? I saw a glimmer of understanding flicker in him. That's it. You got it. I saw another chunk break off of Winslow Hubble. No, they didn't. Would it surprise you to learn that your parents transferred $30 million into the Pierce Bateman account a week after the Goldfarb story? He looked at me with incipient horror. And that's in addition to the $150 million they already have in there. He stammered. No, they never... They pay your salary, Vinny. Between brokerage commissions, transaction fees, profit-sharing fees, and a bunch of other little crumbs, I'm willing to bet your parents actually pay Pierce Bateman a little more just to have you around. I work with some of the firm's biggest accounts. I laughed. He really didn't know. Winnie, come on. You shuffle papers on some of the firm's biggest accounts, and I'll bet you have someone watching you to make sure you don't screw up. In fact, you're Pierce Bateman's highest paid intern. Hell, most of the secretaries there have riskier jobs than you. I'm the goddamn vice president, he said, his voice rising. Your wife reports to me. I spoke softly, as if to a child or a broken animal. You'll be vice president as long as your parents invest in Pierce Bateman. Hell, if they invest enough, you could even become senior vice president or general manager. But you'll never become more than a glorified paper pusher. I took a sip. As for Ash, I'm willing to bet her accountability to you boils down to her forwarding a few of her emails to someone with real power. He gave me a quivering smirk. I had enough power to seduce your wife, you bastard. Ah, there it is. This is it, the arrogance I've been waiting for. I glared at him. It seemed to fluster him. And now we come to the main point. Are you ready, Winslow? Yes, you entertained my wife. In my bed. What was it, 4 times? 5 times? 6. And then I put the hammer down. How many times has it been since then? Winslow's face lowered as I continued. It's been a year and a half, Winnie. How many times has my ex-girlfriend brought you back to her bed? It was… After the divorce, she said she didn't want to muddy the waters. You can't be that stupid, Winnie. We've been divorced for a year now. We've been living apart for a year and a half. I laughed. Besides, the water was crystal clear. I have a videotape of the two of you in my bedroom. Mr. Plum is in the conservatory with a candlestick. And once I moved in, you were able to entertain every night and twice on Saturdays. The only reason you're not together now is because she doesn't want your fat flesh touching her. Screw you, asshole! He shrieked. She liked what I did to her. I was better than you. I leaned back in my chair. You know, when I was watching you two together, I noticed something funny, Winnie. You seem to talk about me a lot. He blinked. What? Check out the video. It's amazing how much of your conversations revolve around me. What are you… He was breathing hard. I laughed. That's what it is. Kukareku. You said it a lot in the video, too. See, here's the thing. When most men find themselves around a beautiful woman, they can't stop talking about her. But the minute you find yourself in a room with Ashley, you start talking about me. What? I was wincing. What? I shook my head. Jesus, no wonder they made you work as an intern. Doesn't that seem weird to you, Vinny? It sure seems weird to me. He covered his ears with his hands. Stop calling me Vinny, you worthless bastard. He looked like he'd run a marathon. He was panting, and you could hear wheezing in his breath like he was on the verge of tears. He curled up in a ball, eyes closed, hands still covering his ears. I glanced over at the waitress. She was talking to a man in a suit. I assumed it was the manager. I gestured to the check. Don't, he groaned. I'm not saying anything, Vinny. I'm just telling you what I saw. What you're going to see when you watch this video. I looked at him. He was shocked. It's no big deal, Vinny. It's like liking blondes or big women. Accept it and move on with your life. I won't, he whined. I'm not judging, Winnie. At least not for this. I finished my drink and set it on the floor. What about the rest of it? A child without a father, shattered lives, broken marriages, fictitious jobs funded by mom and dad? Yeah, that's what I'm judging you for. His face seemed swollen, red and sweaty. His tie was a mess. His eyes were pleading. What about the video? It's not like you're not going to give it to Marty, are you? I burst out laughing. Winnie, Marty's had the video for a year. I gave her a copy as soon as the divorce was finalized. This one is yours. I handed him the flash drive across the table. What? But she hasn't said anything. Not a word. Winnie, I wouldn't want to risk guessing why Marty stayed with you. Or for that matter, why she came to you in the first place. I don't know what devil's bargains she made to get her ass out of Pittsburgh, and I'm not going to judge her. I pulled a second flash drive out of my pocket. As for why she stayed with you, maybe it was loyalty? Love? Or maybe it was because your prenup said she'd get $500,000 if she stayed married to you for 5 years? Your 5-year wedding anniversary was, what, 2 weeks ago? 3, he replied absent-mindedly. Yeah, I'm not always good at remembering dates. Congratulations and best wishes for many more happy years. But before I go, this is for you. I handed him a second disc across the table. This is a video I made. We'll call it Chucky and Mrs. X. You can't see her face, and we've blurred out any distinguishing features, but I think you'll recognize her voice. I paused and picked up my backpack. Or maybe not. She does a lot of moaning and screaming. Funny though, the video is 2 hours long, and I'm pretty sure I didn't mention you once. The end. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe to my channel and watch for the next video.